At the end of these 4 years, this last term in office of President Trump, how do you see our relationship with Europe? Do we have more in common with them, or are we more kind of pulling back and taking care of business at home?
So, Laura, I really believe that we have a great deal in common with Europe. And I'm not, yes, the Europeans annoy me sometimes, and yes, I disagree with them on certain issues, but we have to remember that is the cradle of Western civilization. The entire idea of Christian civilization that led to the founding of the United States of America, that was formed in Europe. The cultural bonds, the religious bonds, these things are going to last beyond political disagreements, but I think that Europe, and frankly, I would have said this about America a year ago, but Europe is at risk, I think, of engaging in civilizational suicide. They are unable to, or unwilling, too many countries to control their borders. You see them starting to push back against that, and good, that's a good thing. You see them starting to limit the free speech of their own citizens, even as those citizens are protesting against things like the border invasion that got Donald Trump and a number of European leaders elected. So look, I want Europe to thrive. I want them to be an important ally. Part of that is going to be Europe respecting its own people, respecting its own sovereignty, and America can't do that job for them. If you have a country like Germany, where you have another few million immigrants come in from countries that are totally culturally incompatible with Germany, then it doesn't matter what I think about Europe. Germany will have killed itself, and I hope they don't do that, because I love Germany and I want Germany to thrive.
Well, I think, again, the Democrats are claiming they really target you, are stoking a division between Europe and the United States, and that's not going to be easily repaired. And anti-Americanism is increasing in places like Canada and in Europe. Tariffs and other kind of arrogance was the word I heard used.
Well, look, I think friends have to have stark conversations with one another. And the simple truth is that when we look at Europe, we see a great civilization, obviously a great ally of the United States, but we also see some free speech issues that worry us, and we see that they're doing some things on borders that are not just bad for their own countries, but ultimately bad for us. How many of the people who come in unchecked and unvetted into Europe eventually make their way into the United States of America? I think friends can have honest conversations with one another.
We've heard the most disturbing and upsetting reports about what's happening to Christians and other minorities in Syria. The slaughter of women, children, men, given the fall of the Assad regime and what followed. What can, if anything, the administration do given that horrific, it looks like a just horrific massacre?
It looks really bad, Laura, and we're trying to figure out exactly how bad it is, whether this is an isolated incident you see on social media or whether we're talking about a mass genocide. But we know, Laura, unfortunately, when America encourages these Islamic radicals, Islamic rebels, as they're called by the mainstream media, to take over a country, very often it's religious minorities, especially Christians, that get destroyed. And we do not want to see another Christian community erased from the face of the earth. We're talking to our allies already. We're already doing things in private to try to encourage them to protect the minorities, the Christian minorities, the Druze and so forth that are over there. But it's really scandalous. And we have to remember this, as Donald Trump once said, I believe back in 2013, that very often when the mainstream media gets behind these rebel groups in the Middle East, there are people who want to fly airplanes into our buildings. We have to remember who we're dealing with, and we need to ensure that we protect some of these historical communities because, look, whatever your views on the Iraq war were, the consequence of our invasion of Iraq is that we destroyed one of the great historical Christian communities in the world. We don't want to allow that to happen again. We're certainly not going to put troops in Syria, but there are a lot of things that we can do diplomatically and economically to protect some of those groups.
When you were in the meeting with Zelensky, with the president. Okay, this was like everyone was getting along, and so I've seen a lot of vice presidents and presidents before in those such meetings, high stakes meetings, but everyone's in the room. And I haven't often seen a vice president interject as you did, and because some presidents would get annoyed by that. President Trump did not get annoyed by that, and this has happened.
It's a good thing.
This has happened a few other times as well. So my question is, was that kind of a good cop, bad cop thing you were doing? Was that planned? And did he express any annoyance afterward that you kind of jumped in?
No, it was certainly not planned. And what happened is the same reporter had asked 2 questions. I thought they were unfair. So that same reporter asked a 3rd question. The president answered, and I just said, sir, do you mind if I answer that question too? And sometimes, if you notice, he'll call on me at these press conferences. So you've got to be on your feet always with President Trump in the room. But I just wanted to answer the question. And then, of course, something I said in my answer caused the blow up. Zelensky got frustrated with it, and then everything went from there. The president, what I try to do is obviously he's the president. I'm the vice president. I try to be respectful, but I also recognize that sometimes the president wants me to say stuff. And of course, if I think there's something useful I can say, and I think that it's going to be deferential to the president, I'll jump in and offer my thoughts.